everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sleep Paralysis News. This is the only podcast or channel that addresses sleep paralysis specifically, and we discuss it quite intimately and speak to experiencers as well as those who work in the field or surrounding areas, I'd say as well, in terms of sleep paralysis. Today we've got Samuel with us, and I know that Samuel is both an experiencer and he works in the field of sleep paralysis, more specifically dreams and nightmares. I know that Samuel, you do hypnotherapy as well and past life regression work. Do you want to explain to the viewers a bit more about what you do?
Yes, thank you. And yes, to the viewers, my name is Samuel Thomas-Holland, and I live and operate in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, on the Brighton coastal area, which is a lovely, both interconnecting beaches of both Elwood and Brighton boxes, which might be known famously, hopefully internationally at the same time, because it's always on postcards whenever someone sends a postcard from Victoria to anywhere in the world, I guess, they usually send a postcard with the Brighton boxes on it, so that's the famous landmark where I reside, yes. And yeah, I'd just like to begin the day with um, definitely speaking about my niche to begin with at least, and then um, going into the sleep journey that I had as a child, interacting with extraterrestrial intelligence just as much as the possibility of even sleep paralysis at the same time without even knowing it. Um, as I have recently upgraded myself, so to speak, from my mediumship into a combined form with hypnosis and hypnotherapy. And in doing so, I've been able to take various clients into states of subconscious, I'd say, as my current co-host of the podcast that I've been doing recently as well, called The Unseen Tree, refers it to subconscious bliss, as it has brought them clarity for past loved ones who have gone into spirit just as much, maneuvering from grief and loss into a long distance relationship style, what someone has brought forward recently at the same time, bringing forward clarity around dreams, nightmares, and just bringing forward clarity with finding their spiritual guides at the same time and helping them feel less lost in the world, and also finding their higher spiritual intelligence where before possibly there was only lower intelligence stepping forward, trying to gain that same messages but not being received in the same clarity. And I guess this is a good segue to go into when I was a child born in Darwin, Northern Territory, Australia. I was visited, which I didn't understand at the time, in multiple dreams by my, what you would call the extraterrestrial component of my Orion, pardon me, my Orion planetary parents, which I recently discovered that who these beings were, but they represented themselves at the time as elementals. My father being a water masculine, and my mother being a very wind-like cloud figure. And as a child, this always scared me and definitely put me into a paralysis state until I started to understand, the more I matured and the more I grew up, what was somewhat going on.
Thank you very much for that, Samuel. So I just want to backtrack a bit. So you said that you were visited in your dreams, and this is as a child, or is it still going on?
More so as a child, I think, because that there was a lot of domestic violence happening in my current um, uh, experience through through my father's end, and of course that was putting my mother into a submissive, unknowing state. And I feel that there was a lot of "you're not alone in this. We're here to protect you" sort of thing. At the same time as just also saying you've done this before. This isn't your first time around, sort of thing.
Whilst at the same time, there are those that would say that traumatic situations can
Mm.
cause sleep paralysis and these types of dreams. I mean, what would you say to that?
I definitely have had the differing opinion from psychologists just as much as um, that bringing forward of the trauma of my own incarnated father for sure. But going deeper with hypnosis and with subconscious mediumship at the same time, recently I've discovered more clarity on this situation.
So, for listeners and viewers, are you saying that through the process of hypnosis and your subconscious work, you've come to the realization that they were perceptually real entities that you were seeing in your dream state, in your sleep state, shall I say? And
Definitely,
that they were your parents, and you've come to know that.
most definitely, and uh, I've also gauged that through others as well, just as much who I've had discussions with, but mostly it's been through my own journeys in hypnosis, and also those who have also helped me go into hypnosis from a fellow practitioner level to discover those results in clarity. But mostly it's been self hypnosis to reach those results, and with that validation, it's always been quite clear of what's been stepping forward.
And then what's the role of sleep paralysis within that?
I feel that the sleep paralysis within this was I was always petrified as a child, and that's where the sleep paralysis component steps forward. As I was unsure and I was, of course, frightened at the same time, and I was always, it was a constant message, it was a constant dream, and it was a constant fear when I was a child that these entities would always come to me, and then eventually it would stop when I moved to Western Australia. And so they were obviously associated also with the Darwin aspect of my experience at the same time, and also my, I'd also say my higher capacities of my third eye before shutting it off almost in a way, um, to fit in or to just feel safe, I guess is a better terminology for it. When whilst growing up, I felt that I turned a lot of my spiritual components of myself off, as well as my emotional. I also suppressed a lot of emotions growing up that I'm now um, rediscovering, and in doing so, these messages from the past are definitely stepping forward with more clarity. Also,
Do you think that the experiences that you had with sleep paralysis and engaging with these entities impacted your identity and your personality to some extent?
almost definitely now looking back on it, definitely, yeah. I didn't realize that at the time, of course, but yeah, as I keep reiterating, the the fear when I was a child, when we were all probably children, of lack of understanding, not knowing what was in front of me, because of course they were representing themselves as entities, elemental energies at the same time as well, and that very much was a spiritual way of even just looking at things, and of course that freaked me out I keep hearing at the same time, and it was just so paralyzing at the same time, even though I would always remember throwing my covers over my head. I guess that was even a paralyzing experience at the same time, because I could never remember. It was always the entity that would always pull the cover back down, and I would be frozen in place for a little while, and I couldn't move my whole body for a few seconds. I always remember, and then they'd touch me, and I'd sort of come out of that paralysis state. So there'd also be, I feel, a lot of shock at the same time.
Did you ever see them? What did they look like?
My father looked like a clear he always represented himself as a clear, translucent, elemental, masculine figure, because the energy about him represented masculine, but it was almost androgynous at the same time, because there was no genitalia. There was just a masculine energy about the water entity that would always step forward. Ferocious, very fear-based. And then the more I grew, the more I guess it became more. I became more detached from the fear, and almost became second nature seeing them, because it was on such a repeated loop. And I guess from their end they were trying to deliver the message, knowing that the message had not been truthfully given. And that's why they always returned.
So does that mean that now that you're an adult, you believe that you are non-human at source?
Not at all. I know I'm having a human experience. I just not acknowledge at the same time that I'm also having a multi-dimensional experience at the same time as having this experience as Samuel.
Just explain to me then, because you said that these entities were your mother and father. So where does that put you?
That puts me, as I normally see it through past lives, as just seeing the lessons that they brought forward of unconditional love, where there was none or not much growing up in my incarnated version as Samuel, and my past life as an Orion from the planet Orion, it was uh, it was full of unconditional love, of course, and they were bringing forward that unconditional love, but it was being, yet again, as I say, filtered through the low vibration of Gaia and the low vibration of my conscious mind and subconscious plus unconscious, as a very low vibration. Even though they were incredibly high vibrational beings, they had to represent themselves in a sort of mid to lower vibration of the elementals that they step forward as. And that's why there was a fear-based component to both of them, as both the water elemental for the father and the wind and the cloud elemental for the mother.
So the sleep paralysis to some extent was meant to be a positive experience, but it was interpreted negatively. Is that right?
Exactly, definitely, yeah, yeah. And I feel that that's a lot of, looking back on it now, possibly there is a lot of positive experiences in sleep paralysis that where we lack the observation of, but we only see the low vibrational element of.
Well, let's go there for a bit. What positive experiences or aspects are there to sleep paralysis, do you think?
Mostly observation, I find. Observation into unconditional love, into the protective nature of what it is. And also, I'm always hearing with clarity, learning how to surrender, because it's such a fear-based response with the paralysis half the time. If we can learn how to breathe through our mind and surrender to the process of paralysis sometimes, that's where we find the middle point, and that's where the lower vibrational aspects then can rise to at least a middle aspect of vibration, to actually start to see and observe the higher vibration stepping forward for the message instead of the fear.
I think you are onto something. I mean, I have heard experiencers say that if they can relax into the experience changes from being negative to being positive, and that they have wondrous transformational experiences because it's almost as though they touch something that's infinite. You know, it's transcendental and euphoric, the experience, but they need to learn how to surrender, as you would say, into the experience to be able to reach that stage, you know? I don't know, have you ever had anything like that, any positive experiences in the dream state or sleep state like that?
Definitely, but I definitely call it more lucid dreaming, and it does take practice and time to reach those states for sure. Because you have, as I say, just stated, you have to be more observant within your dream, and you have to sort of almost know it's a dream, or you have to even know that it's sleep paralysis and become almost lucid within the experience. Say, the fear does not control me. My observations are everything. I know I'm safe. Having that clarity, and
And
even writing that down on a journal has that sort of transparency and that tangibility to bring forward that into your mind and your third eye. I feel at the same time when I practiced this in the past, because remembering that in your third eye always brings forward that clarity of I need to surrender into this now instead of feeling the fear, observing the fear, and sensing what it's teaching me.
yeah, so your advice for persons then who would like to surrender and learn how to surrender, is there anything else that you could suggest?
Definitely. Breath work and sound healing frequencies. That really does help get you into a lucid state for
And
when you're in paralysis moments. Yeah.
could you
So if you go to
expand on those a bit, the breath work and the sound
definitely,
frequency?
um, well, the breath work is definitely indicated as more box breathing, envisioning, of course, lines in your head to create the square box as you breathe through your nose out through and exhale out through your mouth before going to bed, and that will really help bring you into a more observed state.
Okay. So you visualize a square on your head, do you? And
Yeah.
then you breathe. Is that how does it go?
So in through your nose, a number of beats, usually 5 to 12. 12 being the maximum for if you really wanted to go into that altered state in a way of acknowledgement of the astral plane almost at the same time, as well as lucid dreaming. And then after that, I'm hearing the frequency of 520 is the perfect frequency for the lucid dreaming and acknowledging a clarity for bringing that frequency forward. You can listen to that, I'm hearing, on YouTube or on other areas in streaming areas in the sphere of things. And bringing that forward just promotes lucidity, definitely, and conscious clarity.
Okay, and then you mentioned a sound technique.
Yeah, yes, that's what I was just bringing forward, the 520 sound healing technique. Yeah. So both box breathing and also the 520 sound frequency definitely helps bring you into that state of altered clarity with lucid observation. Is there something you'd like to ask, Cyrus? I thought saw you just then.
Yeah. So Samuel, I don't know if this statistic is right. Maybe you have your own number, but sleep paralysis happens to around 20% of the population. I say it's more than that because people don't necessarily know how to define it when it happens to them. So I would say, it's more than 20%. Let's say 30%. Sleep paralysis happens to 30% of the population. What is so special about this 30%? How come it's not 70% of the population? How come it's not 10%? What's going on with this 30% of the population that's experiencing sleep paralysis?
Fantastic question. Thank you for it.
Are you channeling the
Uh,
answer?
I am actually, yeah. And what steps forward immediately is spiritual contracts. Spiritual contracts in lessons that we have not discovered in clarity yet again, I say, from past lives where we brought them forward for our own experiences as in our own human experiences yet again, that we did not discover or was seen as demonically possessed in past lives, and thus for you'd go into mania, you'd go into other mental states that would then be deemed by the church as demonically possessed. And this is now stepping forward these days in as sleep paralysis more. And this is both a spiritual contract stepping forward to help you, and that's what I'm bringing forward, the lessons of you need to find the observed unconditional love and the messages behind the paralysis instead of the fear. But so often we go into fear instead of observation.
So, in the future, do you see this number rising? Will we have more sleep process experiences in the future, or were there more in the past and this number is now getting lower?
I hear the latter. Definitely, it's the number is definitely decreasing because more
Oh,
people are waking up to the factor of it spiritually, but also just mentally at the same time with a scientific and logical approach to the understanding of sleep paralysis. And there's not so much, oh, it's demonic possession, we need to exercise it out of them, sort of thing, as it was seen in the past. Mm.
Yeah, because we do know that in the past people were being burnt at the stake. You know, if they came out and said they were having sleep paralysis, it was a really, really difficult time. So your suggestion is that it's persons who experienced things in other lives, those are the ones who are experiencing sleep paralysis now, but it's being transformed and an opportunity to hear the messages from it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And also, I'm hearing it happens a lot to those who are about to have a spiritual, or as I call it, an energetic awakening at the same time. That does not mean that they'll go into the same line of work as me, or mediumship and other things, but that could also just mean they go into a more scientific approach, much like both of yourselves, and go more into the understandings of things in that way at the same time without them realizing that they have been pineal glandly, is that even a word? Third eye awakened. I feel is more of the clarity of stepping forward. Yeah.
Yeah. I do know that there is a sense with experiences that their worldview changes, that and they have this sense that, as you said, that they go through this kind of transformation and spiritual kind of awakening with some experiences, as there's this awareness that the world, there's more to the world, isn't it, than this physical existence, that we are more, and there's a sense that they have engaged with more. you know, they have had an opportunity to touch that and have that experience, you know. I do think though, because you've said several times that there's a message in that, and so for sleep paralysis experiences, you're saying that there is often a message that is trying to be communicated to the individual.
Definitely, and I think that's a good segue to go into the high vibrations of what the Hat Man, of what is considered usually the shadow entities, also represent. That there are huge messages from them just as much. And both the Hat Man and the old woman who stepped forward quite a lot with various people. And I'm hearing at the same time that is also spiritual contracts, that these are mostly definitely their spiritual guides helping them step forward, but still the observed fear is seen that much more clearly in the current situation instead of the observed messages you can bring forward, that these both of these high vibrations step forward with the Hat Man bringing forward unconditional love and messages of clarity of spiritual path and life path for your human journey. And of course, the old woman almost coming forward as a witch of white clarity, because she steps forward and she helps identify within your body where something's not being aligned. And possibly I heard also when I was interacting with her possible cancer tumours that could be developing in your organs later on in life, and to start observing those organs and going to either a doctor or going to a specialist to say, hey, I feel something's happening in this area. But of course the fear unfortunately steps forward more than the message does, but still the pain in that area I'm hearing steps forward, but we lack the observation to find that clarity of what's actually stepping forward with what she steps forward with as well, just as much as he of the Hat Man.
And so why do you think that so many people see the same entities, for example, the Hat Man or the old hag? Why is it, regardless of where you are in the world, regardless of your culture, you'll see the same Hat Man? Any suggestions or answers for that?
Definitely, half the time because he's your 13th dimensional spirit guide, and that he's having to down his bring down his frequency so much that that you can only really interact half the time if you are not energetically or spiritually awakened enough. You can interact, as I've stated before, with this entity and with this energy in the higher vibration of things in meditation states and hypnosis states, and that brings forward that much more clarity. But at the same time, what was given in those states with me when I interacted with this frequency was that it was, of course, the third eye's being opened, but he's having to lower his frequencies so much that, of course, the observed fear is stepping forward more than the observed message of high vibrational 13th dimensional clarity of the unconditional love and showing the path. And I feel that this is always why half of the population still is very unclear of where we're going in life. And this is just another observation of such encounters, that we encounter so many beautiful high dimensional beings, but they always have to lower their frequency so much that the fear steps forward more than the message does.
I mean, it kind of implies, based on what you're saying, that they care very much for the individual who is experiencing sleep paralysis to do that. You know, if I'm thinking that they are very high dimensional loving beings, but they have to lower that to engage with us. And then it's interpreted negatively. To go through all of that as a non-human form of intelligence, they must care for that individual and really want the individual to get the message, to go through all of that for them.
We, of course, and I reiterate how it was. I was always being told when I was in the hypnotic state that it's always a repeated loop. And dare I say, it's almost like what I was saying before in my own interactions with my Orion family, that it's, you haven't gotten this message yet, you haven't got the clarity yet, so I will come back to you again and again until you do, until you observe what I'm offering you, even in the lower vibrational state, to an observed state at least of somewhat clarity, of what I brought forward as the middle vibration of clarity, to then observe the message instead of the fear. And until you do so, I will come back in a repeated loop. And that's usually the spiritual contract at the same time of, there will be a repeated loop until the message is received.
It does sound very much like the spirit guide, you know, where the spirit guide will work with you and be with you, you know, and keep trying to get the messages through to you and keep sending you these nudges and stuff to put you on that track, and never gives up, you know, and is kind of really very much focused on what's best for you and loves you very, very much. It sounds very much like that.
Exactly, and half the time that's exactly what spirit guides are. And of course, with the higher ones like the Hat Man and the Old Woman, it's they're the same, except for, of course, they present so much more fear due to how much more lower that they have to present themselves in their frequencies compared to our other spirit guides, who of course have to lower their vibrations just as much, but not as much to be seen, because they're not coming from such higher dimensional clarity.
Yeah. So you say that you're no longer having these sleep paralysis experiences anymore. Are you having any form of experience when you sleep?
Yeah, mostly because of my interaction with spirit and spirit guides. There has always been lately now, as some call the witching hour. Mostly around 3 in the morning, I'd wake up and I'd feel someone in my bed, or I'd feel someone looking over me more now, as of course going into Reiki healing energy, which I do as well as the somatic body scanning. Uh, I can now understand energies around me that much more impactfully, and thus for I've felt both spirit who had passed away, who I interact with in unconditionally in bed sometimes with me, just hugging me and acknowledging their interaction more with me, and that has sort of freaked out my inner sense of preservation sometimes, because you wake up and you feel this presence next to you, and it's not malevolent or it's not evil. It's just this very, I love you unconditionally, and I'm wanting to interact with you in that observed clarity. But of course, when you wake up and you feel that, you go, "Oh shit, what's happening?" immediately, because you go into a bit of shock at first, and then you realize, "Oh no, calm down. It's just this person, or it's that spirit guide stepping forward with unconditional love." And then of course you just thank them and go back to sleep, of course, if you can. Yeah. And it's always around, yeah, the 3 o'clock margin half the time, but they have stepped forward sometimes when the veil is that much more thinner. Hence, we're going into Halloween soon as well, when the veil is that much thinner. And of course, that's when us as mediums feel the spirit around us that much more with clarity.
Great, great.
Mm.
Well, I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add, Cyrus.
Nope. Thank you very much for the insight, and let's all just keep building the community together so we can step up our spiritual intelligence together. So I appreciate the conversation.
Great. So, Samuel, if anybody wants to contact you, what's the best way?
So the best way would be either info, my email, which is listed below, and also my phone number, which is also listed below, would be the best two ways of contacting. But also it's the social media tag that I've also given to you, Sheila. I think, did I give that to you?
Okay, I'll add it to the podcast when I send it out then, your contact details. And
Definitely.
thank you again very, very much. Very
Thank
interesting.
you.
Thank you very much.